Last time we met, we talked about this idea of bittersweet. It's the idea that when someone hurts us or wrongs us, sometimes it feels really sweet to hold on to that bitterness against them. We said that as good as that might feel at the time, there is a better way, and that actually the sweetest thing is to let go of the bitterness, to learn to take things that are done to us and make something better come out of them. But of course, that's much easier said than done. We can talk all day long about how good the idea of forgiveness sounds, but when it comes to actually doing it, that's a whole nother story. I mean, seriously. Think of the last time someone did something that hurt you, or when something happened to you and you thought it was unfair. Maybe it was something simple, like maybe your little brother finished the last of the salt and vinegar potato chips, even though he knows you love them so much. Or maybe it was when your friend thought that they were texting someone else, but they were actually texting you. And the text said some stuff about you that wasn't so nice. Or maybe it was when your stepmom grounded you for breaking curfew, but let your stepsister off with a pass. Chances are you didn't have to think very long or very hard to come up with a time when someone hurt you or you were treated unfairly. In fact, chances are we've even experienced this kind of hurt or letdown with ourselves. We expect ourselves to act a certain way or break a certain habit or get better at something, and over again, we let ourselves down. We fail to meet even our own expectations. And when this happens, we can often get stuck with this tape playing in our head on replay that makes us feel so stupid or reminds us of our wrongs. So we keep beating ourselves up for getting it wrong again and again. We've all been there. For some of us, our experience of being let down or letting ourselves down is super fresh. You came here today having just lived this, or you're living it right now. And when we're let down or hurt by someone else or ourselves, we have this tendency to react in a number of different ways. We get frustrated, we get angry, we get distant, or we get even. No matter how you react, the truth is the same. Because of the unfairness or the hurt, a relationship with somebody is broken, damaged, and not right in some way. Everything we do is in reaction to that. And we find small ways to be dismissive of or rude to them, like saying, "You do you," or telling people that that person is canceled, or setting out to get revenge however we can. And in a lot of ways, our reaction feels justified because we feel like they were wrong to do what they did, and we're right to be as upset as we are. It only makes sense, right? But that just leaves us with this question. Where do we go from here? If they were wrong and we were right, does that mean that we're justified in how we treat them, no matter how bad that might be? Does that mean that we're off the hook and won't be held responsible for how we handle our relationship with them? Does that mean that we get a pass for some of our most hateful behavior because of what they did? I mean, not being mad or not being frustrated or not creating distance almost seems like you're saying what was done to you was okay, right? And the last thing you want to do is send a message that you're okay with how you were treated, or that the person can keep mistreating you because it wasn't really that big of a deal. In situations like this, the idea of forgiveness seems weak and irresponsible and completely unfair. And to further justify our response to being treated poorly, we think things like, aren't I supposed to be more like Jesus? And wasn't Jesus the one flipping over tables in the temple when people got it wrong that one time? I want to be like the table flipping Jesus when I'm angry. Now listen, we get it. Forgiveness can sometimes feel like a cop-out. Today we're going to look at a passage from the Bible of Romans, which was a letter that the Apostle Paul wrote to the church in Rome. Rome was at the very heart of the largest empire that has ever existed in history, the New York City of its day. And this letter was written to the people there who had just started following Jesus. Put yourself in their shoes for a minute. These new believers, found themselves surrounded by people who were as far from being followers of Jesus as possible. In fact, Christianity was a new religion and it was spreading fast. And the leaders of Rome didn't quite see that growth as a good thing, which made the new Jesus followers a major target. And if you're living as a targeted group in one of the most violent cities in the world at the time, chances are you're feeling like things might be unfair or unjust. You might feel like the Roman leaders were the enemy and you were just an innocent citizen. You were in the right and you should have the freedom to get even or get mad or hold a grudge for how you're being mistreated. Because if anyone is the problem here, it's those powerful Romans. They had the power. They were the ones that were doing the things that were unfair. But Paul doesn't give the Christians there a pass to be angry or bitter. In fact, he changes the focus entirely on them. And he says, this isn't about the people who are persecuting you. This is about you. This is what he writes. But God demonstrates his own love for us in this. While we were still sinners, Christ died for us. Romans 5:8. In other words, he says to them, maybe there's another way to look at the situation. We're no longer focused on making a case for what's fair or unfair, or what's just or unjust, when it comes to how the Christians were being treated. We're talking about God's love for you. See, when you understand who God really is, it changes everything, even how you see forgiveness. The truth is, when we have gotten it all wrong, when we have done plenty to deserve punishment, when we didn't deserve it, God extended love. God didn't hold back. God saw you and me at our very worst, and he didn't even flinch. He moved in our direction by sending Jesus with no conditions. See, whether you're a teenager in the 21st century or living back in the day in the first century Rome, the temptation is, when we're wronged, to get so caught up in what was done to us and what the other person deserves that we forget how often we get things wrong ourselves. The temptation is to look at the other person who wronged us and dismiss them, to move our focus from ourselves and our wrongs to the person and theirs. But Paul is saying God looked at what we did and didn't dismiss us. God loved us, and then God dismissed our sin. God didn't cancel us. God canceled our wrongs. God didn't give up on us. Now, let me take a quick second to make sure I'm being clear. We are by no means saying that people who treat you unfairly or abuse you or take advantage of you get a pass to keep doing it. If you're experiencing any kind of abuse, this is my encouragement to you to go have a conversation with a trusted adult. But wherever you're at, here is the thing that we want you to get. When we start to realize how God's forgiven our wrongs and chooses to love us no matter what, then we have to ask ourselves, what does that mean for how we see others who have hurt us, others who have treated us unfairly? And Paul answers this question for us in this letter to the church of Colossia. Bear with each other and forgive one another, and any of you have a grievance against someone. Forgive as the Lord forgave you. Colossians 3:13. Bear with each other. Okay, so what does that mean? That is a picture of carrying a weight of each other's imperfections together. It's the picture of patient commitment to seeing each other as human instead of villain, even when that's super challenging to do. Because of what God has done for us, which is extending love and forgiveness at all cost, we are called to do the same for others. To forgive as we were forgiven with no strings attached, no conditions, and nothing held back. The truth is, this can be really hard for us to accept when it comes to how we see and treat others. But it can be just as difficult when it comes to how we see and treat ourselves. For some of us, we are much harder on ourselves than we are on others, right? And for us, Paul says the same exact thing. Jesus isn't stingy with his love or forgiveness. He offers you and I both love and forgiveness at the very same time. And if God has forgiven us, if God has made us right and sees us as we were meant to be, then we should see ourselves the exact same way. But here's what he doesn't mean. It doesn't mean that we treat what was done to us or what we did as no big deal. Paul isn't downplaying the root problem or excusing the wrong that we did or the wrong that was done against us. He's saying whatever was done to you, however unfair it was, that was real and that was a big deal. But just as God looks at you and the mistakes you have made and sees you as more than the stuff that you've done wrong, we too need to see the people who have treated us unfairly as more than that thing that they did wrong. God set the standard really high here, and God's forgiveness tells us exactly how we should see ourselves and see others. You could say it this way. When it comes to forgiveness, we want to cancel debt, not the person. We can call out the wrong thing as wrong, but we will refuse to sum up a person as only that wrong thing. And when we see them, we will continue to see them as an imperfect human and will decide to see them as God sees them, and us as God sees us, as people worthy of love and not just the sum of our wrongdoings. We do this because the offense was real, but it doesn't tell the whole story about the person who wronged us. Just like the things we have done wrong don't tell the whole story about who we are. God has always looked at us and seen us as more than the stuff we've done wrong and more than the sin we've committed. God looks at us and sees us as someone to love. So God forgives, and now we're called to do the same for others. So, how do we cancel the debt and not the person? How do we stop being so hard on others and ourselves when they get it wrong or we do? How do we bear with each other, like Paul talks about? How do we stay focused on God's unstopping love? Here's 3 places to start. Number 1, identify where you need more compassion in your life. Maybe you're way harder on yourself than on others, and forgiving yourself is much harder for you to do. Maybe you need more compassion for others. Determine which you tend to lean towards and pay attention to that, and figure out the areas where you might need to show more compassion, and then work on practicing that. Number 2, identify who you're beating up. Get specific. Is it you? Is it your mom? Is it your 3rd period teacher or your old football coach? Who are you mentally canceling or only seeing as the wrong that they did? What do you need to do to start seeing them or seeing yourself as God does, as someone worthy of all love and forgiveness? Remember, no one is perfect. Whether you're holding yourself or someone else to that standard, it is impossible to meet and will only lead to disappointment and frustration. People will let you down. You'll let yourself down. We can't control that. What we can control is how we handle ourselves when we're let down or hurt and disappointed.